This is Dr. Herbert Harris, and this is the day number 12 of the big read of our book, Solving the Race Issue in America. And let me tell you something, folks. These 11 days here have been just incredible. We started on February 1st, the first day of Black History Month, and we had a chance to work with young people. You know, we had my daughter, who was a graduate of Columbia University, and Dr. Rogers' daughter started setting us up, really going through what we call the prologue and setting up those ground rules for really doing this program. And we talked a lot about why the book was written, because this question often comes up. People say, well, why did you write this book? And the truth is that I wrote the book a number of years ago initially, but when President Barack Obama was elected, I truly thought that we had solved the race issue in America. I thought it was a done deal. I thought it was over. And I literally put the book on the shelf. And after that first election, if you remember, there was that wave of take our country back. I was speaking at a conference once, and the speaker ahead of me got everybody was talking like, and we're going to take our country back. And I remember getting up and I said, you know, thank you so much, sir. I said, I did not know that our country had been taken. I did not get the memo. And as soon as we finish, you got to fill me in on who took it. And so that consciousness evolved on up until 2016, when we have the Make America Great Again. And so it said, man, you know, something has happened. And so we really went back to our notes and updated our notes and really put solving the race issue in America together again. And for this last year, the book, it's almost as though the book wrote itself. You know, some of the things that I've seen, I'm just amazed. I'm like, I must have been plugged into something to make this stuff happen. So right now, we have been through really almost half of the book. And we started with some of the early things. We talked about some observations, some of the things that I know you and I, Mr. Cleveland, we have seen some of the interesting things about the early days of integration. You know, when a black cop couldn't arrest a white person in North Carolina, and when you couldn't have two black police officers ride together in a police patrol car in Philadelphia, and it went on and on. Yes, sir, Dr. Rogers. Thank you.
Yes. Hi, I'm great. We have our other reader for today, Dernika David. And I think when I sent her an email, it did an autocorrect. So it didn't come across properly. So we're waiting for her, if we could send her another invite as panelist so that she can log on with her. I sent her my invite, but it won't allow her to log on as me, which I think it has in the past. And so I know that's a little technical glitch, but is it possible with her correct email address that we can send her an invite as a panelist?
Well,
we can't do it because we
know.
started.
Let me do this. Why don't you and Mr. Cleveland go forward? Let me see if I can do that in the background.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you. As you can see, audience, you know, even in Zoom, there's some technical difficulties, but we're working them out to bring you a superior program. Again, we're reading H.J. Harris's wonderful work, and I'm being joined by advisor, elder, Professor Emeritus Donald Cleveland of the Florida African American Student Association. Greetings, big brother Cleveland, Elder Cleveland, Professor Cleveland. How are you today?
I'm doing well, Dr. Rogers, and hotep to you today.
Hotep. Could you tell us a little more about our wonderful student who is joining with us today, Dernika David? I have an excellent bio of how she's the president of the Florida African American Student Association, and she's a student actually at a community college who's preparing to transfer to the University of Florida. But in this space, while we're awaiting her presence, we just wanted to let the audience know we have a lovely young lady, prepared to read with us today, a student as well. And Baba Elder Cleveland is her advisor. So could you just speak a little bit to who she is as we prepare for her presence with us?
Sure. Danica is an outstanding leader. As Dr. Rogers has mentioned, we have an organization called the Florida African American Student Association Incorporated, probably one of the very few throughout the nation that brings students together, different African student unions and different Black student unions in colleges and universities. We bring them together in the state of Florida, and we assist them in interacting, interfacing, interchanging, and addressing the issues that directly impact Blacks in post-secondary institutions so that we can be more successful, not only in enrolling our brothers and sisters, but assisting them in graduating and then helping them to become productive, even more productive citizens. So this organization is the voice for over 200,000 students of African descent in the state of Florida. And
Wow.
so it is a student organization, and so it's run by students. So, and Danica is the president of that organization. Of course, we have other officers as well. But she is a student at Seminole State College here in Florida, doing an excellent job in leading us and directing us and helping us to continue to reach our goals here in the Florida African American Student Association.
Thank you. That's an excellent introduction. And for our audience, normally at this time we're reading, we just want to get you prepared for the student leader who will be with us today. We're working out the technical issues as Dr. Harris is rejoining us. And just a little more about the Florida African American Student Association, of which Danica is the president. You were saying, Brother Cleveland, that you all have 200,000 students represented, and you're representing schools throughout Florida, the state of Florida. And she, again, is the president, which means she is literally interacting with all of these students.
That's correct. We serve as the voice of those students that are enrolled in colleges and universities throughout the state of Florida. And again, we speak on issues that directly impact us as Black people. And we bring students together throughout the year. Normally, we do it face-to-face, but because of the pandemic, we've been doing it by Zoom. We're having summits. In fact, we just had a very successful summit in November. And we're preparing now to have another summit in April. It's going to be a 2-day summit, April the 9th and 10th. And of course, again, Danica is leading that cause and assisting us in being successful toward preparing for that.
Thank you. Dr. Harris, welcome back.
Yes, Doc, you have to try to send her your link again. There's no way I can join her.
I'll do that. And in the meantime, can we move things around? She was very excited about reading about Black Wall Street, which is our first portion of our reading today. Would you care, Dr. Harris, to begin there, or allow Brother Cleveland to begin reading that part while I go and bring her along with us?
Sure, why don't we go ahead, Mr. Cleveland? That'll be great.
Okay, now, do you want me to read my portion and then we're going to come back to her portion? That's what we're going to do? Yes. Okay, not a problem.
I'll be right back.
Okay. And so thank you, and I'm going to begin reading. It says here, there must be a special place in hell for those who crush hopes and dreams of other people, for those who excel and succeed in the matters of this world by suppressing others with hollow promises and dreams deferred, who discriminate by day and copulate by night with their captive prey, who are quick to deny others those inevitable God-given rights that they themselves so cherish. In Congress on July the 4th, 1776, there was a unanimous declaration of the 13 United States of America that provided as follows. When in the course of human events, it becomes necessary for one people to dissolve the political bands which have connected them with another, and to assume among the powers of the earth the separate and equal station to which the laws of nature and of nature's God entitle them, a decent respect to the opinions of mankind requires that they should declare the causes which impel them to the separation. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. After enumerating the grievances against the King of Great Britain, the founding fathers, appealing to God Almighty, Supreme Judge of the world, concluded this declaration: we, therefore, the representatives of the United States of America, in June Congress, assembled, appealing to the Supreme Judge of the world for the rectitude of our intentions, do, in the name and by authority of the good people of the colonies, solemnly publish and declare that these united colonies are, and of right, ought to be free and independent states. And for the support of this declaration, with a firm reliance on protection of divine providence, we mutually pledge to each other our lives, our fortunes, and our sacred honor. Signed by John Hancock and subscribed and signed by 55 men representing the 13 colonies. As such powerful words were debated and written, I would imagine that these honorable men prayed to their God in the beginning, throughout the proceedings, and surely at the end of such lofty words were reviewed and endorsed. Many of these men who signed this Declaration of Independence, declaring before God that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, were in fact being duplicitous and ingenious because they owned slaves. When Thomas Jefferson, a slave owner himself, was commissioned to draft the Declaration of Independence, he included a passage or clause that condemned slavery and attacked King George III's indulgence of support of slave trade. Jefferson wrote, "He has waged cruel war against human nature itself, violating its sacred rights of life and liberty in the persons of a distant people who never offended him, captivating and carrying them into slavery in another hemisphere, or to incur miserable death in their transportation thither. The Christian King of Great Britain, determined to keep open a market where men should be bought and sold." Representatives of states of South Carolina, Georgia, and other southern states that profited directly from slavery, and northern delegates whose ports housed and profited from slave ships, caused this anti-slavery clause so passionately written by Jefferson to be completely omitted from the final version of the Declaration of Independence. The founding fathers knew that the slavery issue was both a divisive and defining issue for the new America declaring its independence from Great Britain. John Adams, second president of the United States, understood the racist reality existing and totally defining in the birth of this nation. John Adams wrote in a letter to Timothy Pickering about the writing of the Declaration of Independence that Jefferson had met with him to review his original draft. He says, "A meeting we accordingly had and conned the paper over. I was delighted with its high tone and the flights of oratory with which it abounded, especially that concerning Negro slavery, which, though I knew his Southern brethren would never suffer to pass in Congress, I certainly never would oppose. The omission of this anti-slavery clause and evidence that slavery issue was a deal breaker leads one to believe that the framers of the Declaration of Independence never intended for Black Americans to participate in the benefits of freedom and equality in America. This belief is reaffirmed in the statements made in the White Declaration of Independence, written by the white Christians, businessmen in the coup of 1898.
Let me open my mic. Doc, you have, let me tell you, you have laid out some serious stuff there, Brother Cleveland. And one of the things that I really was attempting to accomplish in this passage was to recognize how critical the issue of slavery was in the development of this country, that it was so critical that but for that slavery, but for that issue, America would not have been born. And as John Adams has said, if the slavery issue was brought in, if they condemned King George for enslaving people, and the slavery issue was incorporated into the Declaration of Independence, the Southern states would not join in. And I often look at where we are right now and how this very pervasive issue keeps coming up time and time again. And I say to myself, you know, if the slave issue was embedded in the nucleus of the creation of America, it's like the slave issue was embedded in the baby. If America was a baby born of a mother, and then slavery is a part of that baby, like a heart or lungs or feet or eyes. And so to really dispense with this problem, it's going to take a serious spiritual transformation, because it's beyond, you might say, material means. So we may get back and do a little unpacking on that. Dr. Rogers, did you want to add something? Mr. Cleveland covered that session, that whole section on in the beginning, really sharing how the interaction between the founding fathers and the creation of their document, the Declaration of Independence, was so really saturated with that slavery consciousness.
Problem. Yeah, and you know, because Elder Baba Cleveland has been an advisor to student leaders, and you know, Plato has this statement, the beginning is the most important part. And he's founded this organization. He could probably speak in his own language, in his own words, to the importance of the beginning and what your response is to the reading that you just had of Arthur Harris's work, Brother Cleveland.
Okay. Yes, I think what I've gotten from this are a number of things. First of all, you can see the hypocrisy involved. As we created this nation, you know, it started off on shaky ground. It started off on lies, and lies because of the fact that there was a group of people that were too lazy to do the work themselves, and so they were able to make, and I want to say make us slaves, not that we were slaves, we were made to be slaves in order to continue to build this country that we have now. But because it was built on lies, it was built on sand and not on rock, then you can see that this country has never really been the country that it should be, because it's not on solid ground. The mentality that the forefathers had to have taken in order to have slaves and to even know the importance of the fact that we can't put this in the Declaration of Independence here, understood that there has to be a certain mind frame for me to have in order to say that you are less than a person. And I have to trick myself into thinking that, because if I can make you less than a person, then of course I can treat you as a not human person, not human being. The tragedy about that is that people have bought into that. Not only white European brothers and sisters, but we have bought into that. So then we go around, and then the, I guess, descendants of those forefathers think that they now are superior to another group of people, and have gotten into our mind that we have received the fact that we are inferior. And so when you have both of those that are not true, trying to operate to make America what it should be, then that's the dilemma that we're facing today.
Wow. And as a counselor, I can hear, you know, you have an extensive bio. We spent quite a bit of time introducing Dernika David, who's with us in video. We can see her picture now, and we'll be able to hear her voice. But as a counselor, I'm hearing the need that the nation needs counseling to reverse this notion of the foundation of lie that has resulted in this false dichotomy of superior and inferior. Is that what you're saying in part?
Sure. In fact, as we enter into Black History Month here, and we know the founder, Dr. Carter G. Woodson, he understood that, I mean, he understood that to the nth point. He understood the fact that we were miseducated. In fact, the book, The Miseducation of the Negro. So in order for us to try to turn this whole thing around, we have to be re-educated. I was like talking to Dr. Harris earlier about the fact that, you know, we're kind of more mature people on this conversation. So we kind of old school. And in old school, we didn't have the computers and all this kind of thing. But now we're trying to catch up. We're trying to relate to this younger generation. So I look at it like this, when you have the mainframe, which I have been introduced to, you can put anything in that mainframe. If the mainframe comes with information in it, if I don't like that information, I can simply go in and wipe out all of that information, and I can put in whatever information I want in that mainframe to make my computer work like I want it to work. Well, this is what has happened, as Dr. Carter G. Woodson mentioned, the purpose of Black History Month, and of course, we know that's all year long, but nevertheless, that our mainframe has been captured, I guess, and wiped, and then other information has been put in there. And so we have to take that out. We have to re-educate ourselves to the real his story, our story, versus his story.
Yeah.
And we know that because we know that his story will never reveal our glory.
Right. And with that in mind, thank you for that. That's an awesome set of insights. We're going to unpack those further. We're going to bring on Dernika David. We see your wonderful photo. Can you unmute yourself, Dernika, so we can hear your voice?
Hotep, everyone.
Hotep.
Hi. Thank you for having me.
It's so good to have you here. We can hear you, and you can begin reading at your pleasure.
Okay. Today I will be reading about Black Wall Street. In 1921, white men destroyed a thriving Black American community in Tulsa, Oklahoma, known as Black Wall Street. At the turn of the century, African Black Americans in Tulsa, Oklahoma built the most successful Black community and business district in the history of the United States, Black Wall Street. At this particular time in history, racial hatred, lynchings, Jim Crow laws, segregation, and discrimination were at an all-time high. A unique community of ambitious and fearless Blacks built a thriving business district in a 36 square block section of North Tulsa, Oklahoma. This small town was originally called Greenwood and Little Africa, but soon earned the nickname Black Wall Street by the New York Financial District. The community was comprised of successful Black doctors, lawyers, scientists, school teachers, oilmen, business owners, and entrepreneurs. There were hotels, churches, a hospital, schools, a bus line, private cab companies, general stores, feed and grain stores, a bowling alley, real estate offices, hair salons, restaurants, nightclubs, 2 movie theaters, 1 700-seater, over 100 different booming businesses. There were at least 10 Black millionaires in Black Wall Street. 6 had private airplanes in 1921. Recent research indicates a paper trail where Blacks were financing businesses on New York's Wall Street. Several successful entrepreneurs in Black Wall Street were in the oil business with third world countries during this time. The Black dollar recycled and circulated throughout the Black community. Many white businessmen from South Tulsa would come over to Black Wall Street to borrow money from wealthy Blacks. At that time, Black Americans could not deposit their money in white banks. Essentially, they were cash rich, but power poor. On May 31st, 1921, the worst race war in the United States history erupted in the streets of Tulsa, Oklahoma. After hours of bloody fighting, Black Wall Street was bombed from the air and burned to the ground. All Black Americans were rounded up and taken to intermittent concentration camps. Possible thousands of Black men, women, and children were slaughtered. Dead bodies were dumped in the Arkansas River. Others were buried in mass graves around Tulsa. The actual death count is unknown and to this day remains a mystery. Why is the number of Black Americans killed by white Christian Americans always a mystery? military aircraft used to kill Black Americans. The bombing of Black Wall Street was the first time in American history during non-military times that people and their community were bombed from air. Recent 1999 research has revealed that military aircraft were used in the bombing of homes and businesses of the Black citizens of Tulsa. The facts are astonishingly clear that the Ku Klux Klan had overwhelmingly support from the police, government officials, wealth businessmen, and thousands of white supporters throughout Oklahoma. The bombing and destruction of Black Wall Street was by no means an accident. It did not happen suddenly by an outburst of anger. It did not happen by two opposite races deciding to go to war. It was a well-calculated, meticulous plan to stop a major Black economic development and monument that would have evaluated itself across the country. The 1921 Tulsa race riot was part of a heinous master plan to undermine, halt, and destroy the economic success of industrious Black Americans. The so-called 1921 Tulsa race riot was a part of that same sinister master plan, alluded to 23 years earlier by Rev. Blackwell in Wilmington, North Carolina. The primary purpose was not to kill, but to educate. The white people hold the Negroes in the highest power, so long as they observe their place and position. The local press, authorities, the KKK, and powerful white men in Oklahoma at that time set out to ignite an all-out race war between whites and Blacks. They accomplished their goal. A Dream Deferred by Langston Hughes. What happens to a dream deferred? Does it dry up like a raisin in the sun, or fester like a sore and then run? Does it stink like rotten meat, or crust and sugar over like a syrupy sweet? Maybe it just sags like a heavy load, or does it explode?
Is a roller coaster of emotional reading because we begin with the highs of Black Wall Street, and we go through some devastating facts, Dr. Harris, and you bring us back to A Dream Deferred. Would you care to respond to Dernica's eloquent reading of your text?
You're muted.
You're on mute, Dr. Harris. There you go.
Dernica, you got me so excited, I forgot to turn my speaker on.
Thank you.
You did such a good job of reading and really giving life to the words. You know, when you write words, they have one vibration, but when you hear them, they have a totally different vibration. And as you were reading, it just reignited this idea of the systemic nature of how Black people have been treated in this country.
Mm-hmm.
And I noticed that now there is a movement to eliminate. I know in the state of North Carolina, the discussions on race and racism, the legislature is actually moving to eliminate the word systemic and institutional and referring to racism from all of the literature that our children are going to be learning. And it is once again perpetuation of the same deception and untruth on which the country was built.
Mm-hmm.
And as a result, eventually, you know, someone once said that you take away my books and my education, and then you condemn me for being educated. You take away my job and my means of making a living, and then you call me lazy. And what we have seen historically, and I think this is a point that white citizens need to see, because many white people recognize the issue, the challenge of racism, but many don't want to see the systemic nature of it, how it was an actual intentional series of acts. When you go behind the Tulsa race riot or race war, there's always a precipitating event revolving around a Black man and a white woman. There's always this sexual nature to it. that in Tulsa, I think a black elevator operator was operating the elevator, and somehow he bumped the lady, or the lady bumped him, or the elevator bumped, and they bumped each other. And that was the pretext for the riot, for the war. And to see the massive response to it, in other words, there was no idea, there was no reason to, there was no goal to punish him if there was a perpetrator. That clearly there was, that this was just a pretext for a well thought out plan to eliminate this. And once you kill a dream like this, it's very, Tulsa never recovered. And for many years, when we were researching for the book, many of the people who were alive at that time were afraid to talk about it. For years, they would not even talk about it. And we found the same thing in North Carolina after the coup of 1898, that there, you know, in the 50s, there were people who were still alive who had been around, and they never talked about it. I know I, as a child, never heard about it. If anybody talked about it, it was in the back room, in the bathroom with the door closed, standing in the shower. And so this whole idea of systemic racism, as Dr. Reverend Blackwell, the minister in Wilmington, said, the fact that there were people killed, he was saying that this was not to hurt people, but to educate, that the white Americans always wanted to see Black Americans inferior, poor, powerless, servile, and that picture they have never given up. And it continues to this day. Clara, one of our listeners, Clara, said that, you know, for a person to be perpetrating this lie of America, that it reduces the perpetrator to be less than that which they're seeking to destroy. You know, you can't, when you hold another man, the only way to hold another man down is to be where you're holding him.
Yeah, yes. And you know, when Dernika and I talked a bit earlier before she came on and read with us, she was talking about how excited she was to read the part about Black Wall Street. Could you speak, Dernika, to your level of excitement, why you're excited, and what reading the story of the success does in your mind as a young person?
Yes, of course, Dr. Rogers. So in particular, I was excited to read about Black Wall Street because unfortunately for me to say, it was just over the summer of 2020 that I learned about Black Wall Street, you know, during the whole Black Lives Matter movement. And to me, that feels like it definitely has something to do with the school system I attended, but not just where I attended, you know, nationwide. And how that plays with racism in education. They filtered out what we learned. I never got to learn about Black Wall Street, and it makes me think if it was still here today, there would be lots of generational wealth within us, within Black people. So I find it, you know, I find it really disappointing, but not surprised that it has taken me so long to have even learned about Black Wall Street. And it's something that we need to learn about earlier in school. There was Black people that were thriving, although the odds were against us. Like the reading said, there was 10 millionaires, especially within that time. That's something that almost seems impossible, but they made happen. So it's nice to have that, to look at that as inspiration. You know, and that's what excites me about learning about Black Wall Street, because, you know, our people, you know, above all, we still rise. But of course, you know, it was unfortunately taken away from us.
Great point. And even in your generation, there are people that are latching on to that history. They're starting institutions like the Tulsa Real Estate Fund. And in the spirit of the Black Wall Street, they're actually doing crowdfunding to buy property, and people being paid dividends off of just the memory of Black Wall Street that people are taking inspiration from to take entrepreneurial action today. So I'd like to ask, because you mentioned the level of excitement and then the kind of leveling off or the disappointment. What are your thoughts when you read Dr. Harris's words, both about the military, being utilized on American soil to bomb this community, as well as the poem in the end, Langston Hughes, What Becomes of a Dream. What are your thoughts with that, Dernika?
My thoughts with that almost reminded me of today's history and how it repeats itself. It said that, the KKK was mostly responsible for, dropping the bombs and able to even having that on America's soil. So obviously the people that are a part of KKK are the people that are in uniform, are the people that are in the government. Those are the same people that support each other, so it was easy for them to get away with it, and that still happens today. And I think the poem was amazing to capture just exactly how I felt about it, like a heavy load, or does it explode? To me, it's like these racist people are in high places. And even though if us Black people have something for ourselves, or let's say we have something good going for ourselves, there could always potentially be a white person in higher power that is racist that can just burn it all down. And so I feel like that kind of relates to recent events. If I want to say George Floyd, we had a racist in uniform. And because we had a racist in uniform, he was able to get away with that. So it relates to this, how the KKK was able to get away with bombing a whole entire city. So
wow,
that's really
thank you for that. Would you care to respond, Elder Cleveland, and then Dr. Harris, you can respond to all of this that they're bringing forth. And Brother Cleveland, just what are your thoughts as you hear a student leader of the Florida African American Student Association speak to how this impacts her? What are your thoughts as an advisor and as an elder and a professor emeritus at your institution?
Well, I'm so proud of Dernika and the other students to see that they are becoming more aware of the real story. I feel a little guilty as I hear her talk, because she says she just heard about this in 2020. And I think that we as elders have probably dropped the ball as far as telling our youth the real story. We have not passed that on like our Jewish brothers and sisters. So we're going to have to do a better job at passing our history on and letting them know our history, so then they can be more aware of interpreting what's going on around them. So it's not just a mystery to them. They can understand, they can put the steps together to see how we've come to this point. The other thing that I think we need to do as well is, and I think Dr. Harris has done a great job with the Bit Read, is that we have to try to tell the story of our history like a book. In other words, so many of our students think that we started from slavery on. And so if a person thinks that his ancestors just were slaves and that's where we started, then he or she can't really aspire to be very much, because you didn't come from very much. So we have to tell this history like a book. Start at the beginning back in Nubia, and then we bring it on up. So when we do that, then we show to our youth and to ourselves that we are the creator. We generated this whole thing. We started this whole process. And then as we move along, we will include our other brothers and sisters in the time frame. So then they can see the whole picture. And that makes more sense to them versus trying to take a book up, you start it in the middle and you read it, and it's not going to be as informative as you could make it. The other thing I like to say is that there were a number of Black Wall Streets. We picked this one here, but I think of Rosewood here in Florida and other areas where our white brothers and sisters were jealous of the progress that we were making, doing so much with so little, and was outdoing them to the point that they just took control of them, where they just wanted to destroy the whole thing so that we could never even envision being successful because they're wiping that out. So we know that success builds success. And the more we see how successful we were with little or nothing, then we know that we can even do more.
And what's interesting is I didn't get to read your bio in its entirety, but in your bio it speaks to how you've taken students abroad. You've taken them to Benin and Ghana and Senegal and Lome, Togo, and you've also taken them to Egypt. Do you find that when you're exposing the students to our history beyond the beginning of slavery, that it changes how they see themselves, or what do you find is their response to that sharing of information?
That's one of the greatest joys, and we've been doing this for 25 years, where we straight, except for this year, we weren't able to go because of the pandemic. But that's one of the joys that I received from taking brothers and sisters, even our white brothers and sisters with us. We take them too because they need to know this history as well. They've been told lies, so they need to see the real deal. But when we go there, when I take them, like you say, we go to Senegal, we go to the Gambia, we go to Ghana, Togo, Benin, Egypt, South Africa, Johannesburg. We go all over the continent, and we're there for 2 weeks. And during those 2 weeks, our students really see the real deal, you know, not what somebody has told them, but the actual deal, because we have been told that our brothers and sisters on the continent don't like brothers and sisters from the United States. Well, when you see how they welcome us with open arms, when they take us into their villages and homes and so forth, and how they embrace us as brothers and sisters, then again, that dispels that Willie Lynch syndrome myth that they want us to believe. So it's just so enlightening to see that. And over the years, we've just really, it's a life-changing experience when you do go there. And I would encourage anybody to go at least once, because you will never be the same as far as the way that you see things.
Right. Excellent. And we have a comment from our audience that's paying attention on Zoom. Gerard A. Morrison, he raises this point. Why do we love to show Black Wall Street with esteem when Wall Street commodities were used to enslave Africans early on? And I'll take a first run at this. I think, Mr. Morrison, that, you know, in the African tradition, there was the marché, there's the marketplace. And it's a place where we engaged in commerce one with the other. And we brought that over here to the States as well. For example, if you go to New Orleans, Congo Square, they talk about how on Saturdays or Sundays, those who were enslaved Africans would go to Congo Square to engage in trade and commerce with each other and would communicate using the drum. And out of that came revolts to enslavement. I think, you know, it's a way to identify with this market exchange concept that resonates with people who will read the book because they're familiar with Wall Street. But I hear you, and I think that a way to think of it is that within the context of market and doing business with one another, that's what transpired both in Tulsa, Oklahoma, and as the elder Cleveland stated, there were several Black Wall Streets all over the country. In Atlanta, Georgia, right there where Atlanta Life Insurance Company was and the Odd Fellows building, that was a Black Wall Street. Dr. Harris and I traveled to the Asala conference. We met a young lady from Pine Bluff, Arkansas, and she indicated there was a Black Wall Street in Pine Bluff, Arkansas. In my hometown of Raleigh, North Carolina, Hargett Street had over 400 Black businesses in the block on Hargett Street. Now it's still anchored with Mechanics and Farmers Bank. So whether we use the term Black Wall Street or whether we use the term the market, I think it's the notion that we were engaged in commerce one with the other. Would you care to respond, Dr. Harris?
Yeah, and thank you so much. That is a great question. And I think that's one of the things that happens when we conflate two different things. Black Wall Street, the purpose of sharing this information is to demonstrate the systemic nature of racism and not to talk about how powerful, it was. Wall Street has its own issue. I'll call it White Wall Street, New York Wall Street has a whole nother issue. And they also benefited from it. But we have to always be careful. I call it dysplasia. And dysplasia is what happens when you have a wrong that was committed and you displace the thought from that wrong by conflating it with another idea. Example, when George Floyd was murdered, there was an outpouring of real, a heartfelt outpouring. There were demonstrations and, you know, who was behind it, Antifa or whomever, whatever. But the powers that be, the people who control they chose to focus on the demonstrations rather than the wrong that had been done. So all of the energy to rectify the system, when we talk about atonement, it's like, we see this wrong has been done. What do we have to do to fix it? You know, not to pay you for it, but to fix it in a bigger sense. So just all of us, it's important when we, especially in studying this issue of the Black experience in America, one of the traditional ways that you might say the powers that be maintain their sense of superiority is by redefining and displacing ideas. So they were two different apples and oranges. Mr. Cleveland, as you were sharing a couple of things, I had the honor of working with Dr. Ben. And I know Dr. Ben Yohanan, and we went to Egypt together. I spent almost a month with him there where he was lecturing in the different, so we went from Abu Simbel, we went to all of the antiquities, and we went there, one of our main trips is in the 80s before, you know, when the Aswan Dam was built. A lot of the water now from the rising of Lake Nasir is covering up some of the antiquities. And so even at that time, we had to go by a boat to some of the temples. And now I'm sure you can't see them anywhere. They're all covered up. But one of the things that I really got from traveling with Dr. Ben and looking at the up on the walls and the various temples, the Valley of the Kings, Hatshepsut's temple, is when you go through up on the walls, you see painted people of color. And it's amazing. You say, well, wait a minute, hold it. We forget that Egypt is in Africa. And the current residents of Egypt are very different from the residents of Egypt who were there 3,000 years ago. And when you think back, you know, so as Black people from African origin, we didn't begin in slavery, that our people were building pyramids 10,000 years ago, that they were calculating the stars and the trajectory of planets 15,000 years ago. And it's important then because once again, it gives you a grounding on who you really are, that the mass media, the system wants to define us as lazy, shiftless, worthless people that you can do anything to. That way they can do things to African Americans and not feel guilty about it. But it's a setup because every time African Americans, Wilmington, North Carolina, we had a thriving business community. There was Black Wall Street in Durham, North Carolina. We had insurance companies. And when young Black people hear that these things existed 100 years ago, in 1898, while the coup was taking place, you had Black people with an insurance company in a building in Durham, North Carolina Mutual. You had Atlanta Life down in Atlanta. And so what has happened is that when our success as a people is contrary to the image that the white power structure wants to project, so that it can then justify the things that they do to our people.
And we have another question I'd like to put to all the panelists. I'll just preface it with a takeoff of what you just said. They asked Richard Dick Parsons, who is president and CEO of Time Warner, what did he think of racism? He said racism are people's lowered expectations of what we can accomplish based on what's going on in their head. So I think when we lift up things like Black Wall Street and our international connections, our Pan-African connections, prior to engaging with Europeans, we see the greatness that we once had and we can rise to that greatness once again. A question for all panelists is put forth by Clara Chambliss. Clara asks, since the real truth of Black accomplishments were withheld from the history books, and earlier she makes the point that our Latino brothers and sisters don't get our history as well. So they have this skewed view of who we are. Is there not a need to set out to re-educate our people along with others? It's got to be more life to all, not less life to none, or at no less to none. Danica, would you care to just respond to the comments we made or the question that's asked by Clara Chambliss in your point of view?
Yes, I do believe there is a need to change how things are taught in history. America is made up of not just white people, of course, but people of color, Black people, Latino, Asians. And if you notice in history class, you only learn about white history. That is something that over time, and as we're noticing now, is becoming, I kind of, dare I say, irrelevant, because we are not only made up of white people in America, but we are truly a melting pot. So it needs to adjust to how America is right now. It is a diverse country, and it's one of those things that I have sometimes I have friends in different countries, and they are shocked to believe that there's even Black people in America, or that there's even Spanish people or Asian people in America, because in Europe, they think of America as just a white country, when truly it's not. And over time, it has changed where we are diverse, but we need to get that treatment that this is also our land too. So it needs to also start in the classrooms and with our history books and what we're teaching children and what we're teaching high school students and what we're teaching college students. It needs to integrate Black history, Latino history, all types of history, and not just white European. That's how I feel on that.
Thank you. That's awesome. Brother Cleveland, would you care to respond as well to the notion or to take off where Sister David left us?
Yes, and I agree that it has to be a process of re-educating. And as I mentioned earlier about the book situation, it has to be like a book. And we just have refused, I think, to especially those people that write, that have the pen write your reality. So we'll have to understand that we're going to have to start having the pen. It's just, if I just briefly tell you about this little story about the hunter and the lion. Every night, this father would go up to his son's bedroom, and would read him this story about the hunter and the lion. And every night, the hunter would always win, always kill the lion. So one night he went up there to his son's room. He said, after he read this story to his son, the son said, "Father, you come up here every night, you read me the story, and the hunter always kills the lion. Is there ever going to be a time when the lion will win?" And the father looked at the son and said, "Yes, son, the lion will win when the lion learns how to write." So this is what we need to do. We have to continue to encourage our students and ourselves. We have to be the writers. We have to write our story. As I mentioned, if we don't do it, nobody's going to give you your glory. They're not going to make you better than them. So we have to tell the real story. And so that takes us back to the beginning. And when you see all the great things that we have done and contributed to where we are today, then that uplifts us. And unlike what our white brothers and sisters think, when we do get where we're going to get, we're not going to think about trying to annihilate them or get revenge on them. We're not that kind of people. But I think that's one of the threats that they have, and that's why they continue to make sure that we don't have the opportunity to do that. And lastly, we need to start thinking too more critically. I don't like to call myself a minority, because when you call yourself a minority, then that puts you in a lesser position. When you look critical thinking, you can see that we are the majority in the world. And our white brothers and sisters, Europeans, are the minority. And because of that, they understand that. And so it's a war to them. It's not a war to us, but it's a war to them to continue to keep in existence. Not understanding that we're all brothers and sisters and that we have our rightful place. We're gonna, when one wins, everybody wins. It should be, but it's not like that. So we have to continue to help them to understand that as well.
Excellent. And before Dr. Harris brings us home, Dr. Harris and panelists, Gerard A. Morrison has been raising the question about connecting with the land and the rural areas where a lot of the oppression occurred, but yet where Black folks have been able to retain property. And out of these rural spaces where they confronted racism came people like, they're speaking specifically of North Carolina, Attorney J. Kenneth Lee from Hamlet, North Carolina, Chief Justice Henry E. Fry of Ellerbe, North Carolina. He served on the North Carolina Supreme Court and was a professor at A&T State University. Attorney Ben Crump is from North Carolina. Speaker Dan Blue, Afeni Shakur, Tupac's mom, is from Lumberton, North Carolina. Dr. Chancellor Williams, wow, Destruction of Black Civilization, 2000 AD is from North Carolina. Marion Wright Elderman is from Bennettsville, South Carolina. John Coltrane, yes, Hamlet, North Carolina. Don't forget Thelonious Monk. Ben Vereen is from Laurinburg, North Carolina. Dizzy Gillespie from Cheraw, South Carolina. Robert F. Williams, Nina Simone, I think she's from North Carolina. Dr. Christine M. Darden, Monroe, North Carolina. Negroes with Guns, and they sent us a link here, and they say so many others will come from the region. Imagine if they were only able to cultivate the resources, dip their buckets, drop them down where they are in Booker T. Washington style. And that as it relates to what Brother Cleveland said, which is when the lion begins to write, the lion's going to win every night. So we'll take it back to our author, Herbert Harris, to bring us on home on this one. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. And Professor Cleveland, as you say, it's always his story.
That's right.
He who has the pen writes the story.
It's
always from his perspective. And, you know, the gentleman that was sharing, there's so many great Americans that have come from North Carolina, South Carolina. I mean, the names go on and on, because North Carolina, the Wilmington, North Carolina of the southern states has been probably one of the most progressive. There are virtually more HBCUs in North Carolina. I don't know if there's any other state where there is many.
Alabama has 13, North Carolina 11.
Okay, so it's been a center of education, and out of that comes some of the great people. One of the interesting thoughts is that, can you imagine what they would have been if they were not the type of opposition, the systemic things that happened? I look back, and you know, when you hold a man down, you have to stay there with him. Can you imagine what our country would be like if everybody decided to fly? That instead of putting obstacles to your path, we gave steps to your rise. And knowing that when you rise, we all rise. I mean, we would be a country, when we talk about the greatest country under the sun, we would truly be the greatest country under the sun, because we have such spiritual talent, such educational talent. I mean, we are far along, but racism is what keeps our country from flying. An old man once told me, he said, you know, Dr. Harris, he said, you have to have an exceptional Black man to go as far as an ordinary white man can go. And I had to stop and think for a moment. I'm like, wow. And he says, we may look at the fact that becoming exceptional, the challenges may make you exceptional. But once again, imagine if the challenge instead of been blocking, but lifting. So America is suffering. And we as Black people have a role. We have to educate our children, ourselves, more about who we really are, and not accept the power to define. You know, someone says, it does not matter what they call you, it's what you answer to. Mm-hmm. And so the powers that be in America have defined American Black people in a certain way. And that is why they resist that systemic interpretation of the condition. But I believe in the 100th monkey phenomenon. We're going to talk about that. That there is a thing that happens when you have a certain number of people get together on one good idea, one positive idea, that there becomes a critical mass where enough people can lock into that idea, white people, black people, red people, brown people, and that idea can then be the wings, the wind beneath the wings that will help America fly to its true destiny based on what it says it wants to be. So it is.
Thank you, readers. Dernika David, your vibration is magnificent. It permeates through your picture and your voice. You were here with us and we appreciate you. As
Thank
well as
you.
Brother Elder, yes, ma'am. Brother Elder Donald Cleveland, thank you as well for your presence, your attire, and your mindset. We appreciate all the affirmations. And Dr. Harris, again, thank you for creating this learning community and giving us an opportunity to really share in this, in your reading together for the big read. Thank you, one, and thank you all.
Thank you so much, Dr. Rogers, for a great job, and Dr. Cleveland and Danica. Thank you so much. We could not do it without you. And for all of our participants, those who are listening, share this with someone else. You can go to our website. We are posting all of these sessions now on our website, www.solvingtheraceissue.com, and you can go and listen to them and share this with other people. I think that this is about a conversation that makes things change. And when people can hear and communicate with one another, incredible things can happen. Thank you so much. Tomorrow, day number 13, and we're going to be taking it on home, folks. So go and join us. Register at www.thebigread.net. That's www.thebigread.net. And we will see you tomorrow, 1 o'clock, with a new vibration for solving the race issue in America. So it is.
Thank you. Take care.
We still have people on. Let me end our programs. Okay, whoops. Okay. Yes, we still have folks on. As a matter of fact, if there are any live questions, you can actually unmute yourself. Let's see, we have, let's see, Clara, let me see if I can unmute you. Clara, if you have any comments. Let's see, we have Gerald Morrison. Let's see, I can unmute you, ask you to unmute Gerald. We can actually hear you. Any thoughts? Can you hear me, Gerald, or we can hear you?
The testing, can you hear me now, Doc?
Yes, I can. Thank you so much.
I appreciate y'all. My name is actually Gerard, but it's okay.
Gerard, okay. I like it, the French pronunciation.
You got it, J'adore Antoine Morisson.
Bien, bien.
Yeah, merci, Doctor. I want to thank Dr. Dennis Rogers for inviting me. And we do edutainment, the John Coltrane Music Edutainment Fest.
Yes.
Invite you all out. We'd love to have this dialogue because rural areas get overlooked. You know, I constantly hear people saying, I give out flyers, and then they be like, oh, so when's this coming to Charlotte? When's this coming to Raleigh? I'm like, this version here is not coming there. We're privileged enough to have land that's been owned by Blacks over 200 years.
Yes.
And the facility is owned by the AME Zion Church. So we talk about that. And the building holds about 1,100 people. So
beautiful, beautiful.
We're right between Hamlet and Bennettsville. But we love to have you all come down. But then some of the other things that I was referencing is I've been adamant about my county, which is Richmond County, where Hamlet is.
Uh-huh.
I did some research and we found out all 7 of the municipalities, including the county commissioners, all have at-large systems when
Yes.
as far as structures in government.
Yes.
And a lot of times I think we just accept things as they are. But an epiphany came to me and said, you know what? How can you even run for office when you got to pay to put signs and everything around the whole city versus just a district?
Mm-hmm.
And when I started looking at the voting records, most of them were unanimous on things because people don't, because they don't have districts that they represent. They kind of go along to get along.
Yes.
So, and you know how my mentor taught me, his name was Representative Herman Gist. He was a state legislator in North Carolina. He said, until you learn this economic game, you can't get into political because you got to be free because you get pimped.
Mm.
So all that being said, you all can talk about what we can do to go ahead and specifically get more of this combination of district and at-large councils in the rural areas, because we know what they perpetuate, and as well as the judicial side, because let's be honest about it. We got our butts kicked by Mitch McConnell quietly appointing, well, it was really in our face, but they didn't make it an issue, but by appointing all these federal judges nationwide. So it's like we got to get that judicial side and the local side back.
Well, Gerald, thank you so much, because, and it's such a big endeavor. I've worked with, as a matter of fact, we have a former state representative on the line. Let's see, Ms. Sandra Spalding Hughes, who served in the House of Representatives and in the City Council. Sandra, can you unmute yourself?
And tell Sandra hello. Her daughter went to the illustrious North Carolina A&T with me.
Yes. Hey, yes. Sandra, unmute. I don't know how to tell you to unmute, but there's something. Let's see, I just asked you to unmute.
In the area while she's coming up, that area when you talk about rural area, yes. Columbus County, her hometown is in our region too.
Yes. Sandra?
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yes.
How about that?
Small world. Aggie pride.
This is a small world.
Aggie pride. Yes, yes.
Yes, indeed. Aggie pride. And the persons who started the North Carolina Mutual lived in city blocks, probably 8 blocks from my home in Whiteville, North Carolina.
They're your cousins, aren't they? Why you being humble? The Spaldings and your Freemans are your cousins.
Every one of them is related somehow. You are
including right. Stedman.
Yes.
Stedman, you're right. You're right. Stedman grew up down the road. We didn't say down the street, down the road from us. Right.
That's because y'all didn't have no streets.
That's right. We had roads.
Or like the Lumbee say, roads.
Yeah.
Right. Roads. You're right. You're right. You are exactly right. So I understand what you're saying about the districts and folks taking what does not belong to them, and they need reorganization. I can definitely understand that. Definitely, that is a problem in many of the rural areas where people don't have representation.
Well, you know something, Gerard, that issue came up when Sandra was on the City Council. We researched and had people from the
state office,
the state come in, and we did the research, and we were really on the way to putting in districts. And but what has happened since then, we weren't able to get it through at that time, because when you put districts together, it diminishes the power of those who favor at large, and so you have that battle going on.
And the incumbents.
Yeah, so at that time we couldn't get it through the incumbents, but then now the state legislature has made some changes. So now even if a county, even if a city, if a county or region wants to be district representation, it seems now it has to be approved by the state, which is the state government is against districts. So I think the bottom line is that it's such a big picture. It requires money, it requires leadership, it requires strategy. And when the way we are racially is because of systemic institutional racism, which means that it has had money, it has had strategy, it has had systems behind it. And to confront it, we have to do just as well. Hey, Clara.
Hi there.
How are you today?
I'm doing wonderful, doing wonderful. Such a blessing to see you and to be in this space, to listen and to grow, because I'll have a birthday coming up, and I remember you telling me, don't tell people how old you are. Nobody will believe it. But God has blessed me to be here, coming up to 78 years.
Woo, go ahead.
Yeah. and I'm still growing, still growing.
Well, I tell you, I quit my old mantra. I'm 77, so I'm right behind you. We're growing together, girl.
All right. All right. It just shows you. I think the thing that's so exciting for me,
Mhm.
we picked up so much insight and wisdom on this journey.
Yes. Yes.
Mhm.
And the old folks say, and I ain't tired yet.
Yes.
Yeah.
Amen.
We've got to keep drawing, trying to be that which God created us to be. And as I began reading your book, I felt the Holy Spirit move. I thought, now this, God has positioned him for such a time as this. And
Mm.
this story has to get out.
Yes. Yes.
So there are some people that I'm going to be sharing this with, because these seeds need to land in some good soil so they
Amen.
can grow the crop that God intended it to grow, because it's so counterproductive.
Yes. Yes. Wow.
God will give us what we need to allow the truth to inform us
Yes.
and to move us forward.
Yes.
And we've got to be able to deal with it.
Yes.
Yeah, because it's counterproductive to all of us.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
It's not even in the white man's favor.
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Clara. That is so powerful. Let's see, Wayne. I think I've given everybody the power to unmute. Wayne, if you would like to unmute and share any, Eslyn. I just learned how to do this, so we hadn't done it before.
You're doing good, Herbert.
Thank you. Let's see, Eslyn, did you want to share anything? I see now. Let me see. Let me make sure I've given. Let's see. Ask to unmute. Okay. And Wayne asked to unmute. Okay. All right. But anyway, we have learned quite a bit. Gerard, I thank you so much for your insight. And I had a chance to Alice Coltrane. I was at John Coltrane's home once in New York. And, you know, he had a recording in studio in his basement. And we were down there blowing, man, we were playing and singing and carrying on. And Alice plays the harp. It was just unbelievable.
Oh yeah, and well, I love for you to come share that at the fest. Coach, Alice, the mother Alice. I know you're talking about the second wife,
Yes.
but his mom's name was Alice also.
Really? Okay. Yeah.
Her brother lived across the street from me in Hamlet.
Wow.
And my paternal grandfather, Dr. McQueen and Dr. Wells, they bought the birthplace in the early 80s.
Wow.
But during the that time when the 1619 thing was going on the year before, and Tavis Smiley had the State of the Black Union at Hampton.
Yes.
I was talking, Cornel West calls me Hamlet when he sees me.
Yeah.
He stumbles through my name like y'all do, so I'm used to it by now. I just tell people but he showed me a letter that was handwritten from Alice Coltrane.
Uh-huh.
It was shortly before she died. And if you still have any of those contacts, because I'll be going to Philly when the Corona stuff gets better.
Yes.
The Strawberry Mansion region in West Philly. And then
Yeah.
I hope to go to the house in Long Island where you were. I was in can't even think of it now. But,
Yeah, right outside the city, right outside of Brooklyn. You know?
and it was in Dixon Hill. Were you in Long Island or were you in the
Well,
area?
he lived in Long Island. I had
Dixon Hill in Huntington. Is what
Yes. I had a bar in Long Island. I had in one of my many reinventations. I had a bar on Merrick Boulevard, right off Jamaica, and that was the hottest spot around, man. I mean, if you weren't in our bar, you weren't doing anything.
All right, that was better than the Blue Room.
No, not better than Blue Room. No, that was special. That was special.
Okay.
Yeah, that was.
And have you started the book, or you got any footage on that too? Because
man, I got so many books, Gerard. I wrote a book called How to Make Money in Music in 1978. I mean, I was really in the music business, writing and producing, and so all those, even Thelonious Monk, his wife Nellie, we were friends. You know, just a whole period, man. I lived out in Harlem, and played up at the Smalls Paradise, and when 7th Avenue was a string of clubs from, you go from one club to the other, hopping. You can imagine, I was in a club one night, James Baldwin was holding court. Okay. Not Richard Roundtree, oh man, but that was enough. James Baldwin was holding, Woody Strode was there, and James Baldwin was doing James Baldwin. And man, if you can imagine, everybody just sitting there going, man, and he was talking that talk. I mean,
Is this being recorded? Hold, just give me 1 second, Herbert. Is this being recorded now so we can capture all this?
Of course. Oh yeah.
Okay, good. Thanks.
Yeah.
I mean, I just want to make sure this essence don't get lost, but I mean to interrupt. Go ahead.
Yeah. But we were being in Wells. The club was called Wells and Count Basie's. They were together on 132nd Street. And Illinois Jacket was playing down at Count Basie's. And afterwards, they came up to the bar in Wells up on the 2nd floor. And James Baldwin was holding court. He had his cigarette in his mouth, and he was talking that talk, man. And
those big eyes, huh?
Big eyes, yeah.
Yeah.
And, yeah, he only, as my friend said, he only had a casual relationship with a barber. You know.
He and Don King went to the same barber, didn't they?
Oh yeah. Yeah, they need to lock him up. All right. Hey, listen, everybody. This sounds like so much fun. Gerald, we can get together. I got your number.
Okay, I appreciate that. And
Yeah.
Dennis can reach
Yeah.
out to you.
And
All right, I
we'll be
appreciate it.
together.
Thanks for sharing.
Yes. Now I know how to do this. After each session, now we'll have a little talk so we can get some feedback in real time. Is that all right with you, Sandra? All right, folks. Take care now. Thank you.
God bless. Bye now.
And tell my Aggie I said hello, Sandra.